Okay, so it looks like we are live. Welcome everybody. I'm gonna give this a minute for the audio to catch up here. I want to make sure that everybody can hear me. I just got couple of new things set up. It sounds like the audio is good. 1 second to double check here. Let me know if you guys can hear me. Okay, by the way. Yep, sounds like we are good. All right, sweet. Oop, let me close this. Sweet. All right, well, welcome everybody, and welcome back to another Woodland Pools Cardano Q&A live stream. So I decided what I thought we might do is, because it's kind of fun when we put these together, and I know some people prefer these where we can talk a little bit more versus like the quick edited versions of the updates for the week. We'll still be doing both. So moving forward, we'll do, the edited, concise videos. We'll do the tutorials and stuff like that, breakdowns of new projects. But I think from time to time when there's stuff going on in the ecosystem that sort of merits a little bit longer of a discussion, we'll put together these live streams, and I think I'm going to sort of shift the direction that we go with them a little bit. What we used to do in the past was make them totally Q&A based, where everything we would talk about was based on really just whatever you guys had in mind and whatever you guys wanted to talk about. But I think we're going to do moving forward is what we'll do is for these, there's a few things that I want to go through that I already have in mind that I want us to talk through. And then what we'll do is at the end of each section, depending on who's here and what questions you all might have, then from there we can dig into them a little bit more. And then we'll just kind of work through a certain topic of conversations for that week. The other piece too is that in the past the live streams have gone about an hour, and back when in the bull market where there's a lot of people and a bunch of questions and a lot of energy and stuff like that, it was easy for it to run an hour and we had a lot of good stuff to talk about. But I think now in the bear market there's not that many of us around right now. I think I'll probably keep these a little bit shorter, probably closer to about half an hour, and what we'll do is we'll just kind of just move through these different topics. If there's any questions we'll address those, and if not we'll keep it nice and short so it'll be a good balance between those that aren't here and they're watching it on the replay, don't feel like they have to just commit to a full hour or just watch for maybe about 10 minutes and drop off. So try and keep it to about 20 or 30 minutes, and then we'll go from there. So for folks that are joining, let us know where you're joining from and let us know any questions that you have. And then as we go through this, any of the topics that we're talking about, if you have any questions about any of those, let me know as well. So with that, and also too, if you're watching this on the replay, I'm going to add chapters for the different things on the bottom so you can skip to different topics of conversation if you want to see just those. But so for today, there's a few things I wanted to touch on. The first one I know a lot of people have been talking about is about CIP-1694 and the recent meeting that happened here in warm, sunny Colorado at the IOG office. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Let me skip ahead here. I also wanted to talk about this announcement that came out about Rogue Galaxies that Patrick and the Rogue Galaxies team put out in their Discord, and he now pasted here a picture of the full statement. Also, that made me think about Teiki, I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce this, but a decentralized crowdfunding protocol. It's kind of a cool idea, so we'll talk about this a little bit. And then, where did this go? There was a retweet that Book put out. Here we go. Mark Cuban was talking about NFTs and the future of blockchain and mentioned books. We'll talk about that a little bit. We have this here. And then also want to talk about the Rare conference coming up. So, like I said, as you're coming in, say hello. Let us know where you're joining from. It's always fun to see where in the world people are joining us from. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and jump right in. Let's start talking about CIP-1694. So a quick reminder on the Cardano roadmap. If we remember the different eras that we've been through, Byron was just the foundations, getting everything sort of up and running. Shelley was the start of decentralization, and there was where we got proof of stake up and running, and we got all the stake pools spun up, and all the you as delegators, the stake pools that you delegate to, that was part of the Shelley era. Goguen is where we got smart contracts. In between the two of these, the Mary hard fork was where we got native assets, and that's where we saw NFTs coming about and the ability to mint tokens that were native to the chain other than just ADA. Basho is the era that we've been in for a while now, the era of scaling and getting everything running faster, getting the transactions on the chain moving smoother. If you remember, maybe about a year and a half ago at this point, when Sunday Swap and some of these other large projects first started going live and the network was really crawling, we've seen a lot of things scaling up and moving faster since then. And so now the last big era that we're moving into is the era of Voltaire. And one thing that I will say is that even though we've moved through these different eras here, especially these three, Shelley, Goguen, and Basho. Even though these three, we've done the biggest parts of these eras and these milestones, we've moved past them, there's still a lot of things that are yet to be completed for these, that there are parallel tracks and parallel teams at IOG still working on these things. So for example, for Shelley, we're still waiting on things like partial delegation. For smart contracts, as we all know, with the Vassal upgrade that just came out last year, that was a huge Goguen release in terms of being able to get like reference inputs and stuff like that. So we're going to see more of these kinds of optimizations coming out. And then Basho, we still have a lot more to see coming out in the future with things like pipelining, input endorsers, and a lot of stuff like that that's going to be able to make us scale and move even faster. So let's keep that in mind too, that as we talk about moving into the era of Voltaire, yes, we're going to move into this, but I think it's important for us to keep in context, especially for the conversation we're about to have, not even just right now on this stream, but as a community moving forward about CIP-1694, that in none of these instances, for any of these things that we've seen, has it been like a one and done and it's completely finished. These are all iterative processes that keep moving in flight, in parallel with each other, with dedicated teams that are doing that. So Voltaire, for those I'm sure most of you know, but in case for some reason you don't, Voltaire is the era of self-governance for Cardano, and the idea is that once we have all these other pieces out of the way, that the chain can truly manage and govern itself. So it's a very ambitious goal, and right now there is no other blockchain that's doing this successfully at scale. And what we know also is that the testing ground that we've seen to play around with this concept of governance and being able to vote on things on the blockchain. Granted, it was on a side chain, but vote on things with your actual voting power of the ADA you hold. That's what we saw Project Catalyst was serving that purpose for a long time. But now we want to see how do we actually then get to the point where the Cardano chain is fully governing itself and the people that are on the chain are actually making the decisions about where it moves forward. The need for something like this is something that Charles has been talking about for a long time, even way back in the original whiteboard video. And we can think of examples of why this is important from the very beginnings of other chains. So you can think about, for example, think about Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency to come out. As it was gaining adoption and getting really popular, then there became an argument about the size of blocks and how big blocks should be, and should they get much bigger or should they stay the same size? And just this simple argument about the size of blocks became so divisive because there was no governance mechanism for how people could vote on this as a community, as the users of the blockchain, that then we saw a hard fork, and then we had, one side kept going the way that it was, and that was what we still call Bitcoin, and then from there, Bitcoin Cash is which went the other direction. Similarly, when there was the DAO hack on Ethereum, you had those that said, well, hold on, a bunch of money was stolen, let's roll back the chain to where it was, and we can give people those funds back. And then there was the other side that said, no, code is law, what happened, happened, and the whole point of a blockchain is it's immutable, and so they said, no, we're not changing that, and then once again, we saw a hard fork where we had Ethereum and Ethereum Classic. These kinds of situations are what arise when there is no built-in governance mechanism that the stakeholders of the chain can decide, okay, well, let's put it to a vote and see where we want to go with this versus just, okay, well, I'm going to pick up the kickball and go home, right? So this is why governance and Voltaire is important. It's also what's so difficult about it, because you have a lot of invested interests, a lot of people that are very passionate about it, and we need a way to be able to express how you're going to propose and then make these changes. So this is a massive thing that no one has done before, and the first attempt at how we're going to begin approaching that is CIP-1694. So I want to make sure before we even look at any of this that we're on the same page about what CIP-1694 is and what it is not. CIP-1694 is a Cardano improvement proposal. So for those that are unaware, I think most of you probably know, but CIPs are Cardano improvement proposals. Anybody can submit a Cardano improvement proposal on something that they would like to see changed on the chain and what they would like to see changed. There's a whole bunch of them, the ones that have already been reviewed, some of them that are still under review, and so things like that. So CIP-1694 is an improvement proposal for how we're going to do decentralized governance on Cardano. So this is not an outline of exactly what's going to happen. You'll see that in the document, there's no specific numbers of any kind of parameters or figures or just hard stats. This is only spelling out an initial proposal for what the governance of Cardano can look like at a very high level. So if we look here, there's going to be three main groups. We have a constitutional committee, a group of delegated representatives. They're going to be called DREPs, and then stake pool operators, SPOs. So if we move through this document, let me scroll down a little bit. Here we go. So we can see different kinds of votes that can happen. And I'll link this here. Let me actually go back. I don't want it to be unconstitutional. Let me do this without the here. We'll go to here. Okay. Let me share this with you guys in the chat. And then I'll also put this in the description for those that are watching this after. But there is CIP-1694. Yeah, cool. So here we already have our first sort of comment here is constitutional committees should be elected with term limits. They wield huge power. Yeah, that's a great point. And that's something, too, that I want to make sure that we understand. That the Constitutional Committee, we actually see that it is mentioned here. We have the initial committee. Let's let this jump down. I don't know why it's not jumping down. Let's do this. Here we go. So we have the initial committee, but then the committee can be replaced in a couple of different ways. So they can be done in a government's action, which can be voted on, and also there's the notion of a vote of no confidence. So let's talk for a second about what the Constitutional Committee does, or what the three different groups do, okay? Yeah, I think maybe we just keep it just up here when we're looking at just these three here, okay? So here are the three different groups that is proposed that would be working here, what is being proposed in 1694 for what it would be. Right now, for Project Catalyst, people vote with their wallets directly, right? But the thing is that Project Catalyst is currently on a sidechain, and so anybody can vote because those votes aren't all going straight to the main chain. They're on a sidechain and they're tabulated that way. So the proposal is that, and we'll get to Constitutional Committee in a second, but the proposal is, let's start with DREPs. For DREPs, one of the main reasons for DREPs is because if every single vote is going to be put onto the chain, we don't necessarily want, there's currently about like 1.2 million active stake addresses. You don't necessarily want all of those addresses submitting votes to the blockchain every single time. So the idea is you would aggregate them to these delegated representatives, similar to like any other representative democracy, and they would vote on your behalf. There was a document that was put out here that we'll look at in a second, or rather a graphic that was put out by Air Voltaire, and we'll talk about this in a second. But the idea is for many reasons, including, well, one, having the amount of time to research something, but two, for load on the chain, that these delegated representatives are the ones that vote on different things. The Constitutional Committee, their main purpose, as far as I understand it, and feel free to let me know if you guys have seen something different, if you've read through this document or you've heard something different, but let's keep in mind that no matter what you hear, this is the source of truth for what CIP 1694 is currently proposed to be. The Constitutional Committee, the idea is that if we even take one step back, CIP 1694 proposes the idea that there should be a constitution dictating how Cardano should function as a blockchain. That's something that Charles has mentioned in a previous live stream, that it's something that they probably should have done before, but never really got around to it. And so in order to have proper governance, we need a proper constitution. Now, one of the things that he mentioned in this Twitter space, which I'll talk a little bit more later, I highly recommend that everybody check this out. It's almost 3 hours long. And when I first started playing it, I was like, okay, signing up for another really long Twitter space. But I listened to it on a long drive when I was coming back from the mountains today. And I thought it was one of the best spaces I'd listened to in a long time, so I highly recommend it. But one of the things that he was like pointing out there that I thought was a really good point is that constitutions can sort of take two different approaches. They can either try and be very specific and try and cover all the different cases of things that can and cannot be allowed, or they can be very, very high level and just sort of like, okay, these are the main guiding principles that we want to have. But in this case, once a constitution is set, the purpose of the Constitutional Committee is to make sure that the things that are proposed and voted on are not unconstitutional in terms of what the Constitution was proposed to be. But there's a lot of intelligent things that were put into here in terms of how these different stakeholders work together. For example, the Constitutional Committee has basically sort of like a veto power, where if something comes in, let's say, for example, let's say in our Constitution that we make up, we wrote in there, we said, Cardano as a blockchain should continue to exist. That is one of the things in the Constitution, right? And then let's say that somebody submits a proposal that it would effectively stall the chain, that says, okay, moving forward, no more blocks will be propagated or something like that. Before that would even go to a vote, the Constitutional Committee would have the ability to veto that, to prevent it from even getting to that point. So, to your point here about that they have way too much power and that it's a very sort of concerning thing about how much power they have, this is where I think it's good in terms of these checks and balances. if, let's say, the Constitutional Committee was shutting down things that were not unconstitutional and that they were abusing that power and that they were sort of, let's say, arbitrarily shutting down voting that the people wanted to vote on, then if we see here, let me scroll down, there is the potential for, here we go. Here's a potential for a vote of no confidence that can be put forward by the D-reps and by a proposer. And for that, when it is put into that category, the Constitutional Committee cannot vote. See, we see here like what they can and cannot vote on. They cannot vote on that. The protocol will not allow them to vote on that. So, for example, yes, they have a certain amount of power in terms of safeguarding to make sure that the things that we're doing are still adhering to the Constitution. But if we see they're going astray, then the same delegated representatives have the ability to do a vote of no confidence and to actually vote this Constitutional Committee out. So I think that's a pretty good balance there in terms of how that would work. And then finally, we have stake pool operators. And the stake pool operators, they are involved as sort of a kind of delegated representative where the main way that they will be involved for voting is for an explicit approval of hard fork combinator events. So, for example, if we think about previously, like in the past year or so, IOG would say, hey, we're moving to this new version, and here's the date that we're moving to it, and then it kind of just happened. Starting on version 135.3 was where we saw the big pushback from the community, and there's a lot of back and forth with IOG about when and how we should upgrade. And then after that, IOG put a bunch of things in place saying, okay, fine, so what we'll do is we're going to wait for several different milestones, including a certain percentage of stake pool operators upgrading to the new compatible version, and once they're on that version, we'll take that as an implicit endorsement that is them upgrading is basically them voting and saying, okay, yeah, we're ready to move to this new version. This here with 1694, the proposal is that stake pool operators would explicitly vote and say, okay, yeah, we approve of the new version and we're ready to move forward. So this is a really, really high level of the three groups and how they would work together, but I wanted to put that out there sort of to frame and start this conversation about what CIP-1694 is, what is the purpose of the era that we're moving into, and sort of where we go from here. So some of you, or rather many of you, are probably aware that recently, just this past week, there was a workshop at IOG here in warm, sunny Colorado, where several people from the community were invited in. Like a lot of people, a lot of common names that you see that have been building and doing really big stuff in Cardano. So Andrew Westberg, that we've mentioned on the channel several times, he has a channel called Nerd Out, but more importantly, he's done a bunch of different stuff and written different kinds of scripts and things for stake pool operators. He's a CTO of Project Noom. He's kind of involved in a lot of low-level things across the ecosystem. K-Tor-Z, Matthias, and then also Sebastian from the Hydra team. Two of the lead Hydra people were there. Pi from Sunday Swap. I'm trying to think. Patrick from Endmaker. So a bunch of different people were there, talking through specifically CIP-1694 and how we move into this era of Voltaire. So a couple things about that workshop. I wasn't there, but a lot of feedback from the community was that it felt like it was kind of a behind closed doors kind of thing, and that why is nobody talking about it and stuff like that. I want to sort of dispel some of those things right away. So here we go. So you say vote of no confidence is very unlikely, tremendous number of votes. Yeah. But I do think, though, that the good thing, so the point of vote of no confidence is that it should be something that's hard to do, right? But it is good to have it as an escape hatch where if things get bad enough. So again, if you Mechanized was saying they listened to that Twitter space. I highly recommend it. It was really, really good. Charles made a really good point in that Twitter space where he was talking about how, at least in the American government right now, if you look at approval ratings of people for their representatives, their delegated representatives in Congress, House of Representatives and Senate, just Congress as a whole. I think like he was saying that like the disapproval rating is something like 80 or 90%. Like the large majority of people do not approve of the job that Congress is doing. But the problem is that the way that everything is set up, where you basically just have, well, is it this person or this person? There's that episode of South Park, right? Do you want like a turd sandwich or whatever? And you're just voting between two terrible options. Because those are your only two options, you always have one of these people that stay in, run by these two major parties. There is no way to get out of that. If there was an option for us, as as Americans, and I'm sure for a lot of other democracies, to be able to say, you know what, no, I'm voting for nobody. I want to just get this seat completely vacated and let's just start over. I know a lot of people would take that option. So I do think that this kind of thing, while it is unlikely, or rather, what is a difficult bar to clear, I think that is by design. And also, I do think that when you get to a point where you have a certain amount of discontent, you are able to hit that limit. But anyway, so I'm glad you said that. Keep this conversation going. This is like really good, by the way. This is exactly why we're doing this live and not doing this in edited video. Anyway, so I'll go back to your original point here. But anyway, so going back to the point of this workshop, a lot of people were concerned that there was only so many people invited and that nobody yet has talked about it, about what happened there. So I want to sort of dispel some of these concerns right now. The first thing is that what we've already heard from people that were there, of the small amount of information that we have gotten, is that from everyone, and I'm talking about like everyone that I've heard, of those people that I mentioned, Rick McCracken was also there, Andrew Westberg, Pi from Sunday Swap, Patrick from Endmaker. All of these people that were there, I have seen every single one of them talking about that. One, they thought it was an incredible conversation. Two, they did not at all get the vibe that it was some kind of like attempted IOG takeover. Three, that it was the exact opposite of that it was IOG saying, hey, we have an opportunity here to make a situation where this chain can truly govern itself and it can evolve and move forward in a way that we've never really seen before. And instead of being so cynical about things that we've seen in the past, let's try and actually think big in terms of where this can go and what it can be. And if we were to take all the things that we've learned from other governance mechanisms outside of just blockchains, but like just in our lives and through history, how can we do this better and how can we do this right? So I was also sort of skeptical in terms of like, it was sort of a short notice. Like I heard about it and like, well, what's going on and who's going and why aren't we getting more information? But everything that I have heard so far from a lot of people that I really respect in the community has all been overwhelmingly positive. And the feel was that everybody was invited, everyone was equals to have this conversation, and that a lot of good ideas were really, really dug into deeply. The other piece that I would say is that the reason why we have not yet heard any details about what was coming out from that was a request from Charles and IOG that, hey, here's what we're going to do. There were different tracks that were going on at different times that were digging into different things. So no single person was around for everything, but all of those conversations were recorded and documented. And what they're going to do is they're going to put together all the stuff that was talked about and then distribute that out to all the people that attended. So then once they have a full comprehensive, call it packet, of everything that was discussed, what some of the takeaways were and what some of the next steps were, once everybody sort of has that, then I think what Charles was saying again in this space is that their goal is to do a joint Twitter space with all of the people that were there and have them all be able to talk about whatever they want and their impressions about the whole thing, but with having the information in hand of like, okay, but let's remember this is exactly what we talked about because there's so much that they dug into. So I really like that idea of similar how to when someone goes into a debate, yeah, they have their points that they want to go through, but they have things written down, right? You don't want your lawyer to show up to a trial and not have any notes with them about what they talked about. And I think for something like this, for something being so ambitious and so big of where it's trying to go, I like the idea that before people start firing off, just half remembering things, let's give them a documented account of what everybody talked about. And then, then feel free and go off and talk about, whatever you want, whatever your impressions were and what things you want to see done differently. The last thing I'll say about what we've heard about the workshop that went on is that this is also not sort of a one and done. Again, let's remember here, right? So aside from the fact that CIP-1694 is just an outline and that it is not anywhere in here talking about any thresholds or any numbers or anything, it's also, even just the workshop is not just a one and done. That was sort of a kickoff. And again, the idea was to get everybody excited about the notion of where this governance can go. And the goal is that from here, you've got these 20 or 30 people. The goal is to now have 10, 20, 30 other community workshops that these different people can host and bring in people of different specialties. So for example, you had some folks that were really involved from the community side. You have some folks that were involved from the engineering side. Some folks that were there representing stake pool operators. You had the guys from Hydra representing open source contributions. Being able to have now spin-off conversations and having spin-off meetings to dig into those specific things, and then sort of like, we go from one to many and then back to one again. Then once all these different things take place, they're going to invite these same people back and bring them all together and say, okay, so when you dug in with your different communities and all your different stakeholders, what did you hear? What have you thought about since the last time we got together? And now let's really try and flesh out what this 1694 can be. So there's a really long-winded thing about sort of 1694, Voltaire, the purpose that it serves, the workshop that just happened. And so now I want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that we've been hearing from some of the people that have been around. So I think K Torzi made a really good write-up here just a few hours ago, and he made a good point about his perspective on 1694 and what people don't seem to get. That there's a lot of discussion about it. Let me see here. It's not the end of the story. It isn't even the proposed final governance. It describes an approachable step that gets us closer to the ideal governance. So to him, it boils down to one simple thing: how to improve the current status quo. So yeah, again, this is what I've been saying this whole time, is that the idea here is that this is just the very beginning of the conversation. I think a lot of people are really nervous because they feel like all these things got decided without us. This is not that. This is a start to how do we have this conversation moving forward. So I think that was a really good perspective from him. I will also link this in the description below once we get running. The other piece here, this was sort of controversial, and there was an updated one here. Here we go. That the idea was for who gets to vote. What CIP-1694 is proposing is that the Constitutional Committee can vote, as we talked about. Stake pool operators can vote, as we also mentioned. The delegated representatives can. This was the part here is a little bit controversial, that an independent ADA holder could not just straight from their wallet vote. But the idea, though, is that they would either delegate their vote the same way how you delegate to a stake pool to a delegated representative, or what you can do is similar with a stake pool. So actually, if we even take it one step back here, if we think about the notion of governance on chain, consensus on chain and the propagation of blocks, if you think of it at its simplest way, the way that transactions are bundled, put into blocks, and propagated to the network is through stake pools, right? Now, if anybody wanted to participate in that, if you want to keep it really, really simple, you would say, okay, well, anybody who wants to participate in that mechanism can spin up a stake pool, and they can be part of that process of validating and propagating blocks. But then you think and say, well, not everybody has the time to be a stake pool operator, or the resources, or the capability, or the capacity, or the know-how. So let's make that easier, and let's make it that anybody from their wallet can then delegate to a stake pool and say, okay, so when you're counting the total stake assigned to that pool, just count mine with it, and I am basically voting that that pool knows what they're doing, and they're going to do what they need to do correctly to validate and propagate those blocks. And if they do something wrong, or I don't like what they did, I can always, in a very fluid sense, just delegate to another pool that I am literally voting that they are the ones that I think should be the ones propagating and validating blocks. So the notion of delegated representatives is very, very similar when it comes to now, instead of for the actual consensus and propagation of transactions on the chain, it's now for the governance of the chain. An individual ADA stakeholder, at its simplest sense, if they wanted, could put a deposit on chain, the same way how, by the way, to be a stake pool operator, you put a deposit on chain. It's 500 ADA, if I remember correctly. So for delegated representatives, there is no set number yet. But an independent ADA holder could put that deposit, make themselves a delegated representative, not try and get anybody to delegate to them, but they say, okay, now I can vote for myself. And then whenever these different voting events come, they could vote on it and have their opinions heard. Or, very similar to what we heard, with the stake pool sense, they could say, you know what, I don't have the time or the resources or the energy or even just the know-how to really dig into these different things. So instead of doing all of that work, I'm just going to delegate my voting power to that delegated representative, and they're just going to vote on my behalf. And similar to the stake pool example, if I don't like how they're voting, or I feel like they're not listening to what my values are and where I think that should go, I'm going to delegate to a different person instead. So this does at first sort of feel like a reactionary kind of thing of like, ooh, I really don't like that. But then you realize, though, that in doing it this way, it really does feel like how everything else is kind of working right now with staking anyway. So I kind of don't hate this mechanism. I think it would be cool if there was the option to vote directly from your wallet, but I see why they're moving this direction, and I honestly don't hate it. Like, there are some things I think sometimes too we should remember, like, we don't need to always have a very strong opinion about everything, right? Like, there are some things that I think are really important that we all rally behind, and other things, like, I don't know, it's like, if this is just like a design decision of just do DREPs versus like direct voting, I kind of personally don't hate this. I think it's fine. So, but I wanted to point this out because this is something that a lot of people were talking about. Along these lines, Vanessa, well, sorry, Air Voltaire put this out, and then there was a conversation around it, and in here somewhere, Vanessa, technology poet, was asking about this, and so then Rick McCracken and Andrew Westberg and Vanessa put together a Twitter space where they were talking about this. So I will link this as well. This is a really good, not a Twitter space, a live stream. So this was a live stream on Who Can Vote that you guys should check out. That was a good one. I checked that. I listened to this earlier as well, and that example about, for example, about somebody submitting a case where they say, "Hey, I don't think that Cardano should exist anymore, so no more propagation of blocks." And let's say that in a technical way they made it that like, okay, so we're going to do this new version where nobody propagates blocks, and then the Constitutional Committee would say that's unconstitutional, you can't do that. Andrew actually gave that example in this space. So I think if you want to dig in more into 1694 and this notion of who can vote and what, at a very high level, these different roles are, this is a good live stream to check out. And if you're watching this in a replay, it'll be in the description as well. So then, along these lines, I want to wrap up the 1694 conversation with this Twitter space that Charles put on late last night. It was unannounced, and he did it for almost 3 hours. If you have not checked this out, let me link this again for those that are just now joining. This was the Charles Twitter space. I think this is one of the best Twitter spaces I've seen Charles do, maybe ever. And I think for two reasons. One was because he put himself out there to have the conversation, but two was because the people that actually showed up really just, they brought the questions, man, and both from the audience that was asking them and then Charles in honestly answering. I thought it was a really great conversation, and there were a couple of takeaways from here that really surprised me. There was one guy, Node Shark. I don't know if you guys know him on Twitter, but I was very impressed with him, with the questions that he was asking, because he was very direct and asking things like, you know, some of the stuff that we've seen, like Ada Josephine's, some of these other people saying some of these concerns that are sort of incendiary, and they kind of get a lot of clicks and stuff, but then it doesn't really go anywhere. I had yet to see a conversation where somebody took some of these things and just asked Charles directly live, and then and to Charles's credit, was not just like immediately dismissive or super defensive about it, but actually talked through it. And so one of the things, for example, like this is what I was talking about before, about how like, oh, why was it behind closed doors or whatever else? And then hearing Charles actually talk through like, look, man, we got to start somewhere. We brought in people that we felt like were good representatives of the community. We got them on board with, here's what we're thinking about doing. What's your thoughts on it? Let's get some feedback on this. And now let's empower all of you. And IOG and Charles will pay for all of you to have other conferences and other workshops with other people so you can get even more feedback, and let's bring it all back together. So that was one good example. Another one too that I thought was like a really, really great point that just didn't even occur to me was Node Shark again was asking him about, okay, well, but why is it that this SIP about the governance of Cardano has to come from IOG? Because Jared works from IOG. Why is it has to come from IOG? Why can't it be, you know, something that the community puts together? Because they put together one called CIP-1676. Let me see if that works. Yeah, I think it was called something. I might be remembering it wrong, but they had a different one with a different proposal on what it could be, and he was like, well, you know, well, why can't we do like this different community one? Like, why does it have to be this one that IOG proposed? And Charles actually, I think, made a surprising answer, I think in two parts. The first was he was saying that like, hey, yeah, if it's something that is implementable and with a realistic timeline that the community would prefer and they would vote on that over 1694, then let's do that and IOG will build that instead. I thought that was really surprising that they're even open to, okay, yeah, let's try something else. But he did make a really interesting point that I'd never really thought about before, because we hear Charles talk a lot about how IOG is a private company and how they're sort of doing their own thing. And a lot of times I wonder to myself, like, yeah, it's a private company, but really right now, the main thing that they're doing is building Cardano. And it was cool to hear Charles sort of talking about his vision of like where that's going to go moving forward, where he was very explicit in saying, look, here's the thing, we're building Cardano right now, but our goal is for like, you know, he's like, my goal is not to be thinking about how do I keep building Cardano, you know, for the next like several years. He's like, you know, yeah, we'll be doing these things, but like I want Cardano to get to a point where it's running, it's fast, it's running well, it's governing itself, and then we can just focus on then using those things as a company like IOG to then land contracts like, doing microloan services in Africa or stuff like that, or DIDs or whatever else. So it was interesting hearing him talk about IOG as yet another stakeholder in the ecosystem. I thought that was kind of cool, where he was saying like, yeah, if you will vote on something that's dramatically different, that would take IOG years to build, he's like, I'm not going to necessarily just pay out of pocket for something that I don't personally believe in. If somebody else wants to build that, that's cool, but we're not going to go that direction. But I don't know. I really, really think that you guys should check out this space. I thought it was a fantastic conversation and a lot of really, really good back and forth. If you're out there and you've been skeptical about this whole process and you're worried about where it's going, or you're worried about vested interests of whatever, definitely check this out. Hear Charles talking through it himself. I thought that was really, really cool. So, 1694 stuff. Carlos, you're like, no worries, man. So yeah, let me know for those that are joining now if you have any other questions or concerns about 1694. But yeah, that I think was a pretty good 30-minute overview of that. I also wanted to touch on this. I mentioned in the end of year video for 2022 about how I was excited about Road Galaxies. And that's the thing I said in the video, like, not financial advice, not telling anybody that they should invest it or whatever else, but I was excited about it. I bought a couple of ships. They're sitting in my wallet still. I didn't sell them or anything. And this announcement came out from Patrick and the Road Galaxies team that they basically run out of funding and the project is not going anywhere. And so the TLDR is that, actually, here we go. So let me pull up his thing here. So the TLDR, it's not going to be this full big MMO that they thought it was going to be. They basically run out of money, and what they're going to do is this Rogue Galaxies Fleet Commander, which is going to be a web-based game. They're going to make it its own standalone thing. If you guys want to read the full announcement, let me link this here. Okay. If you want to read the full announcement, I've linked it there, and I'll put it in the description as well. The details, I think, in terms of what actually went down, how were the funds spent or whatever else and this and that, I'm actually not as concerned. And I know that kind of sounds strange, but let me clarify. I have interacted with Patrick several times. I've been following him and the work that he's been doing for a while. I will say, I really do not think that Patrick has ever done anything ever maliciously in this ecosystem. I think Patrick, in my opinion, is one of the best examples of somebody who is fully committed to Cardano, who is fully committed to blockchain solving real problems and doing exciting things. And the thing is, guys, that we need to remember that we are in the most bleeding edge technology. And when you're looking at some of these companies, you're looking at the most bleeding edge companies in the most bleeding edge technologies. In the best of cases, in established ecosystems, most startups fail for any number of reasons. There are people in the comments saying like, oh, well, he had no idea what he was doing or whatever else. Like, I don't know, maybe, but that's not even the point. Like, the point is that, like, if you're investing in one of these companies this early on, you need to be really honest with yourself and, like, look in the mirror about who you're upset with here. Like, if you're buying an NFT like this for a project this early on, like I did, right? I bought 2 of these ships. It was a non-trivial amount of ADA to do that. And yeah, and it didn't work out, and that sucks. But I knew going into it that like it might not, that it was a very ambitious project. Patrick and the team were swinging for the fences with it and just really like just going all in and hoping that it worked out, and then it didn't. And that's just how it goes. And I guarantee you that he's been like thinking about this a lot and losing a lot of sleep over this, and this is not a trivial exercise for them. And on top of it, they've clearly like burned through the funds they had. They thought they were going to have more runway. That runway ran out, and now they're putting in their own money, probably coming out of Endmaker money, to make sure that the game gets to at least something usable. This is not, let's be very, very clear, this is not a rug, okay? This is a project that tried to build something and it didn't work out, the way how projects just don't work out sometimes. Now here somebody says something interesting. It sounds like projects should consider more of a Kickstarter style, where the project only happens if minimum funding is reached, and otherwise people are automatically refunded. And Patrick actually said that, that he agrees. And so, this is it right here, right? Like, I don't know. This is exactly, like I said, I've met Patrick several times, and if you ever talk to him, and I recommend that you do, go to a conference, talk to him in person, you'll see, like, he only tries to do things better for Cardano, and I think a lot of the people in the ecosystem maybe there are some bad actors. Patrick is not one of them. I just wanted to come out and say, like, it sucks that it didn't work out. I bought a ship too. It didn't work out for me. Whatever, man. Like, guys, if you're going to be like this hard on a project not working out, then maybe don't invest in it in any form until it's proven itself. If that's where your risk tolerance is, then do that. But don't get into it bleeding edge and like degen in and like FOMO into it and then call the person names and say that they're like trying to do malicious things just because a project that had ambitions, goals didn't work out. So I just wanted to come out and say that, like, I was disappointed that it's not going to get to that next point, but I do not have any less faith in Patrick's intentions, nor I think Endmaker as a project. I think they're a really cool project. So I don't know. I just wanted to say that. Cool. So that is that. I just wanted to touch on that because I do think also that it's worth sort of like, if I mention a thing, even though, you know, I clearly tell people like, hey, you know, this is not financial advice. Don't just do it just because I'm doing it. I do like the idea too. Like if I've mentioned it, then let's at least follow up on the full life cycle of it if it doesn't work out, because we talk about things when they do. So let's talk about them when they don't. Anyway, yeah. So anyway, that sucks, but it is what it is, and whatever. Let's not be assholes to each other. How about that, right? Let's just be nice to each other. How about that? But anyway, so when we were talking about this Kickstarter thing, it reminded me of this other project that I just heard about. Teiki, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's the decentralized crowdfunding protocol. I need to dig into this more, and I'm going to do a dedicated video on it probably pretty soon. Let me know if you guys have heard about this. But yeah, so for the idea is that you would basically subscribe and stake, and then they would delegate that and then use the staking rewards to fund a project. And then if like things aren't working out, they can always like pull it. So I'm not sure. Let me know if you guys have heard about this. I need to dig into it more. But I wanted to just put it out just because I've been seeing more chatter about it. And I think it's a cool idea. Because right now, if you think about it right now, what's happening a lot with projects is they're like selling NFTs or something like that. So it's sort of like quasi-investing. It's like pseudo-investing. It's like, well, we're not selling tokens, but we're selling NFTs. So, you know, maybe this or the other. I don't know. And I think this is like a much more straightforward way of like, no, look, here, we're backing this project, and here's how we're backing it. And it's going to help projects try and get off the ground. So like I said, if you've heard about this project and have some more information, let me know. If not, I'm going to do a dedicated video on it sometime soon. But given that this came up here with the Rogue Galaxies thing about, you know, saying, hey, maybe we should do like a Kickstarter style, and that there is a project that's intending to do this right now, I thought that was kind of cool. Okay, let's see here. Have you heard of Yamfore? Crypto loans with no margin calls, interest repayments, and indefinite loan terms. Yeah, so Zartsnarf. I've heard of Yamfore, but I have not dug into it. I heard about it a long time ago. Are they up and running? Is that working right now? Let me know. Because like I said, I heard about it a long time ago, but I never like saw anything else about it. There's just so many projects, but like, is it up and running right now? Let's see. I know their logo is literally a little like sweet potato yam. Oh, they changed their logo. It used to be literally like a little yam. Oh, like so, literally you pasted their, oh, there you go. I was about to say, you literally pasted their tagline. Here, hold on, let me pull this up here. Yeah, you literally pasted their tagline. Crypto loans, no margin calls. Yeah, okay, cool. Sweet. Yeah, let's talk. I'd love to hear more about the project. So you tell me, like, so are you guys live right now? Have you funded any projects? How about this? I will check out your community call here. I promise that. I'll check out this community call. But let me know. Yeah. So, and I will say, and this is why it's funny, because I was hesitant to even mention the Rogue Galaxies thing early on, because I usually don't do this, but I was just excited about it, so I just did. And I'm probably not going to moving forward, because the way that I've done on the channel that I usually do is I don't mention projects unless they're already doing the thing. And then if they are and it's running and it's working, then we talk about it on the channel. And the whole idea, right, the visual image of a woodland pool and like slow growing trees, like we don't need to be in the bleeding edge of the bleeding edge technology. Let's sort of let things establish themselves. So lesson learned to me, like, Rogue Galaxies is one of the first times that I mentioned something just like off the handle, and then of course that's the one that didn't work out. So let's see. Public testnet is scheduled for the end of the month, and UI UX preview is available. Cool. So let's do this. I will check out your community call. I'll look into the project, but as I just said, once the public testnet is running and there's like stuff actually happening with it, then I might dig into it on the channel. But like I said, I usually on the channel, I like to wait until things are like established and actually running and have a certain roadmap of, or rather runway of like already doing the thing, and then start sharing with people. So, all right. Accelerate profits. By the way, I got your name when I read it fast. Accelerate profits. Bear market stress and FUD from the government regulation makes everyone cranky. We can be chill and kind for the win. Good days ahead. Yeah, man, totally agree. And I'm gonna leave that up for a minute. Gary Golden, hey, good to see you, man. Decentralized fundraising, yeah. I don't know about it either. I'm pretty interested to hear more. When Meld, I genuinely have not been following Meld very closely at all. That is actually one of the first ISPOs, and if you go back to one of the live streams from like one of the first live streams we ever did, I told people like, hey guys, be very diligent at where you delegate your ADA. You're giving up the opportunity cost of getting ADA. You don't know if this is going to be a thing or not. And now there's a lot of questions about if it's actually gonna to be anything or not. But I don't know. Sorry, I haven't been following Meld. Admittedly, I don't follow DeFi too closely. So yeah, another question about when Meld. So it's funny. Cardano community is the nicest in crypto. Man, if we're the nicest in crypto, I can't even imagine what other communities are like. It's weird because like to your point, the Cardano community is really, really nice for newcomers and getting people up to speed and helping people not feel dumb or feeling just sort of like, yeah, like not feeling stupid about asking things. Like channels like ours, like we are one of many channels that help people get up and running and make a wallet and how to delegate. There's lots of forums and communities, but man, I think people really got to calm down. Like let me, So the thing is like maybe like these people are just like meaner in general, but I will say like Accelerate was saying here, like man, some of this stuff were like, well, as soon as a project stumbles, this conflation of like a project not working out must mean that the project founders were malicious and were trying to like screw people over. Like, God, guys, man, like, come on. Anyway, whatever. So, so let's leave this up for a little bit. Let's just be nice to each other. Cool. So, yes, deal. Sweet. So I will check it out and reach out to me on Twitter and keep me in touch with your updates. And I'm happy to cover it once you guys are up and running. But yeah, let's leave this up for a little bit. Okay, so the Book.io team, I have to make a new banner for my disclaimers up on the top of the screen here. So I'll do a verbal disclaimer for those that don't know. I have been following the Book.io project since they first started, and have been such a big fan that when they opened up applications, I applied. And as of a few weeks ago, I now work for them as a full stack engineer. So take that with a grain of salt. That disclaimer: I work for Book.io, but I think they're a super cool project. So it's in that order, right? Like I thought they were a cool project, so I work for them. I don't pretend that they're a cool project because I work for them. So let's make that clear. But yes. So anyway, this just came out about Mark Cuban talking about his new company. So yeah, sorry, Mark, that's kind of a bad place to pause it. That's it. Anyway, so it was kind of cool. He was talking about. I'd not heard about his. I'd heard about his company, but didn't know much about it. This cost plus drugs company that he had. But then he was digging more into crypto and crypto's evolution and where it can go. And this is the kind of stuff that I love hearing people talk about. And again, I will say, going back to what we were saying before, a big reason why I've always been a fan of Patrick is that Patrick NN Maker. Is that he's always talking about like what are like real actual use cases for how things can actually be solved, problems that are actually be solved by blockchain versus it being a solution trying to find a problem. And so this was kind of a cool conversation. Let me link this without the timestamp. This is a cool conversation with Mark Cuban on blockchain. So he talked about several different things about what blockchain can do, but one thing that he mentioned twice that I thought was kind of cool was talking about the notion of having NFTs, that the NFT is a book and that you can own the book and that you can send it different places and the author can get royalties. So I thought that was really cool that we're starting to now see, and this is on Forbes, 1.38 million subscribers. And on Forbes, you see a billionaire like Mark Cuban who is successfully invested in a lot of different companies, talking about this kind of stuff. So I thought that was pretty cool. So I just wanted to share that because I think book is awesome, and that was exciting and cool. And also, I thought, so they linked straight to where he started talking about books. I recommend just checking out the whole video. I thought it was all like a really, really cool conversation. He was talking about just different things about like life advice and investing and business, stuff like that. I thought it was really neat. So I recommend checking that out. Okay, let me stop and take a look at the chat here because we are getting pretty close to wrapping up. And man, I thought we were going to go shorter, and now we've gone almost a full hour. So let's see here. All right, Gary. Your take. The Cardano folks who have been around since 2018 are chill. People who came in with 2020 hype stage are pissed. Yeah, I don't disagree. Although I will say that it's interesting because there are some people that have come in after 2020 that are mad because their bags are low. and also from the NFT standpoint, where they're like sort of degen flipping in their mat, that their bags are low. But they're also too, what we're seeing is that some that are like philosophical purists that came in for a certain philosophical reason, and then they feel like that as the chain is evolving, that it's drifting from that. I think that's just a part of like growing pains that are going to happen anyway. And you see this even with startups, where like you'll have an initial company with just like 2 or 3 people, and then as it grows and it sort of molds and moves in different directions, people kind of come and go and drop off and whatever else. And that's just sort of part of like the nature of like, that's why it's such a great analogy of like growing pains. It's the nature of these growing pains of a thing, a growing organism, whether it's a company or an actual like living creature or a blockchain, finding where it's going to grow into and making some missteps and then correcting and then kind of like going, or dying, right? There's a real thing that can happen to any living organism or company or blockchain. But I think that's kind of what we're going through, is sort of like all these different people that are all really, really passionate and kind of just like arguing through some of these things. Very interested in the enterprise Cardano phase. I think book helps lay the foundation for enterprise orgs to enter. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess you could still buy one in the secondary. Yeah, they're pretty expensive now. But actually, now I think about it, they're actually not that more expensive than they were when they first sold. So anyway, of course, this is Mark Cuban, not Cuba. Sorry about that. Anyway, yo, Sean. Hey, by the way, for those that are in the chat, I'm genuinely curious. Where are you guys joining from? A lot of times I always ask, although I'm guessing that because right now it's like 1 o'clock in the morning in Europe, so probably most of you are American, but I'm just curious where you guys are joining from. I'm in warm, sunny Colorado. And along those lines, let's end on a good note here. I wanted to point out, I've been talking about this a lot on like Twitter, but sometimes people that are on Twitter following the channel are not the same ones who are watching on YouTube, which, by the way, that's actually a good point. If you are watching this right now and you aren't following us on Twitter, go ahead and do that, because it's just like different stuff that I can like post about there that sometimes is just I don't know, like just like retweeting things like here's like World Mobile being I actually should have mentioned this. World Mobile being featured in Reuters, that's kind of a huge deal. So things like this that don't necessarily make it to the videos. So check us out and subscribe on Twitter. I'd appreciate that. Oh, and I always forget to say this. Make sure that you give the video a thumbs up if you're liking it. Also for those that are watching as well. Yay! Hey Vic, yeah man, you need a power nap, dude. I had one, I drove back from the mountains today and took one right before this. Dude, you're calling in from Australia. What time is it in Australia right now? What's the future like? You have 2 people calling in from Australia. How about that? Awesome. Florida. I lived in Florida for a very long time. Carlos is calling in from LA. Sweet. Yeah, you're in SoCal, right, Vic? You're like, yeah. Dude, I wanna go out there. I miss Los Angeles donuts. Okay, cool. So with that, I wanted to say, for those that have been following the channel and that enjoy having conversations about Cardano, I highly recommend that you guys try and come out on August 24th through 26th to Rare Evo here in warm, sunny Colorado. I'm just talking about this because I was there last year. I thought it was super fun. I have, let me do this. If we go to tickets. Actually, no, let's do this. Let me do this. Let's go to, how do we make an account here? Well, yeah, let's do this. Let's go to tickets. I'm going to link this in the description as well, but I'm going to put it into the chat. You need to register. Here we go. Make an account, and then if you register, let's see here. So go there to register and use code Woodland10. When you buy your ticket, if you use code Woodland10, whether you buy a regular or a VIP ticket, you'll get 10% off your ticket. So yeah, tickets have not gone up yet, but they are going up soon. It's only $150. Well, let's see where the price is right now. Hold on, let's see. Buy tickets. I think it's about to go up if it's not gone up already. Yeah, okay, cool. So, price increase. And yeah, so the price goes up in 3 days. Yeah, so get in there, buy your ticket, use code Woodland10, and if you do, you'll get 10% off. And what I've worked out with the Rare Evo team is that all of the affiliate credit that I would normally be getting for people doing that, I want to bundle it all together, and depending on how many people buy and how much credit we get, I'm just going to use that to help other people go to the conference that wouldn't necessarily be able to afford going. So if you want to go and you can afford going, please do. It's an awesome time. And how do you beat that view, man? It would be so cool to see you guys in person and chat about some of these things in person, because this is nice kind of going back and forth. But yeah, it's you know, it's more fun when we can actually talk in person and like have a beer or something. So see if you guys can come out. That'll be really, really cool. And then if you do come out and you buy tickets, use code Woodland10, and then you'll be helping other people go. I'm gonna literally have them take all of the whatever it is that comes in and immediately take all of that and put it towards credit to helping whoever comes. So we'll see if how much money that ends up adding up to. But yeah, I think it'll be really, really fun. So let's see. Oh, it's midday already in Australia. Nice. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I like how Charles always calls it warm, sunny Colorado. Like right now, it's clearly it was you know, snowing, but you know, whatever. 11 a.m. in Australia. Sweet. Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate it. That's so cool. Yeah, and you know, and that's a good, I think, a good note to end on. What I always tell people with the channel is that, and here, let's do this. Let's go to we'll end on the full screen with your thing on there. How about that? Sweet. Cool. So what I always tell people is that the purpose of the channel and the way that we should all treat each other is that no matter where you are right now when you're watching this, on your blockchain journey, as you're learning about this whole thing, if this is the first video you've ever seen about any cryptocurrency ever, or if you're like Zartsnoff over here and you're like, you know, the founder of a new company, everybody along this road, no matter how far along the expert that they are, all of them, if you're the person right now who's just getting started, all of them at some point are where you are right now. And the only difference between them and you is that they stuck around, they tried to learn, they found resources, and eventually they got to the point where they can contribute in a more meaningful way, or even just for themselves, they just felt more comfortable about this whole different ecosystem. And so I'm a big fan of the reason why I started the channel is I'm a big fan of the barrier to entry that keeps you from being somebody who kind of feels like intimidated about what's going on to then be able to do these things is just education and learning how to do it and someone just showing you how to do it. And so that's why, you know, we put together all these different videos that walk through these different projects and give updates on what's going on every week. And while we do these Q&As and stuff like that, it's for that reason. But what I would say is I would challenge all of you that are out there, especially for those of you that have sort of come a long way, when you're on Twitter or you're on these forums or you're at one of these conferences and somebody asks you a question, if you see that they're struggling or trying to learn, help them out. Like pay it forward for like whoever taught you, and then you help somebody else. And if we all keep doing that, there's a compounding effect where we all keep getting better. It's like the whole, what I always say, we all keep growing together, right? And the idea is that you can grow your investment with confidence. And whether your investment is a financial one or is your investment in yourself, let's just help each other out and let's just be nice to each other. I don't think it's that hard to do. So cool. This is actually, this has been a lot of fun. I'll do this probably moving forward, like I said, where if it's something where it's more of long-form conversation about stuff that went on this week, we'll probably do it this way. We'll go through different topics and then just throw in questions as we go. But yeah, as always, I always appreciate you guys coming out. Thanks for the great conversation. See if you can come out to one of these conferences. I'd love to see you guys in person. But yeah, if nothing else, we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.